Everyone wants success, but almost nobody wants to do the same thing every single day when nobody is watching. That is the gap between the people who get there and the people who just talk about getting there. Motivation brought you to the starting line. Discipline is the only thing that carries you across it. And the difference between a 1% improvement every single day and a 0% improvement every single day is 37 times better by the end of 1 year, or exactly 0. There is no middle ground. There is no almost disciplined. There is only the daily decision made in private, in silence, when nothing is glamorous and nobody is applauding. And John Wick understood this better than anyone you have ever watched on screen. Everyone wants success, but almost nobody wants to do the same thing every single day when nobody is watching. That is the gap between the people who get there and the people who just talk about getting there. Motivation brought you to the starting line. Discipline is the only thing that carries you across it. And the difference between a 1% improvement every single day and a 0% improvement every single day is 37 times better by the end of 1 year, or exactly 0. There is no middle ground. There is no almost disciplined. There is only the daily decision made in private, in silence, when nothing is glamorous and nobody is applauding. And John Wick understood this better than anyone you have ever watched on screen. 4 months, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, no cameras, no audience, no guarantee it would work. Before a single frame of John Wick was ever shot, before the Red Circle nightclub sequence that would make audiences around the world lean forward in their seats and forget to breathe, before the 77 kills across 72 hours that made Viggo Tarasov's hands shake on the phone. There were 4 months of a man showing up to a mat, day after day, in a room with no glamour, doing the work that the legend would eventually be built on. He trained in judo, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, judo, tactical shooting, sambo, a hybrid fighting system they built from scratch and called Gun Fu. He worked with Patrick Murphy for strength and mobility. He worked with the 8711 action design team for 4 to 8 hours every session. His trainer, Patrick Murphy, said, and this is a direct quote, "I have never seen anyone with his kind of work ethic. He puts ultimate respect into every area he's trying to study." The director, Chad Stahelski, said, "The way he operates is not normal. We push him to his absolute limit, and he always brings an extraordinary level of commitment. Not when it was exciting. Every day. And then the cameras rolled. And when they did, when Keanu Reeves moved through that nightclub, fluid and precise and terrifyingly efficient, what audiences saw was not talent. What they saw was the compounded result of 4 months of daily discipline that nobody had watched. The product of a system built in private and delivered in public. That is the whole philosophy. That is the entire blueprint. Before we go further, if you click this video because you're trying to build something and you keep running out of steam before it gets real, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that bell. This is precisely what we build here. The system underneath the story. The discipline underneath the result. Subscribe. Let's go deeper. There is a scene in John Wick that most people watch as pure cinema. The opening, John alone on an empty airfield, running his car through corners at speeds that would unsettle anyone else. And they receive it as characterization, as a way to show us who this man is. A man of precision, of intensity, of impossible control. What they are actually watching is a disciplined practice. James Clear in Atomic Habits, published in 2018 and now one of the most widely read books on human behavior of the last decade, opens with a principle that sounds almost too simple to be profound. He writes, "You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems." Read that again. Not rise, fall. The goal is not what decides your outcome. The goal is what everyone in the room also has. The goal is not the differentiator. The system is the differentiator, the daily process. The thing you do at 5 a.m. when the alarm goes off, and not a single person in the world would know if you did it or not. The thing you do on the Tuesday after a bad Monday, when the motivation that felt so alive last week has gone completely quiet, and all that is left is the choice. John Wick's opening scene is the visual answer to a question that nobody in the film ever asks out loud. How does a man who was once the world's most feared assassin, who retired years ago to live quietly with a woman he loved, who poured concrete over his weapons and his identity, and tried to become ordinary, how does a man like that still move like that when the night comes and the basement opens? The answer is that he never stopped doing the work when nobody was watching. Reeves' training started many months before John Wick went into production. According to director Chad Stahelski, Keanu doesn't want special treatment. He wants to do the hard work side by side with the stunt team. And critically, this pattern held across all 4 films. Not because each new film brought new motivation, because Reeves had built a system, a daily process that continued between productions, between shoots, across years, as he moved from his late 40s into his mid-50s. The man who performed 98% of his own stunts in Chapter 4 was not more motivated than the man who started in Chapter 1. He was more practiced, more compounded, more built. James Clear uses a thought experiment. What if you improved by 1% every day for a year? The math yields roughly 37 times better by year's end. What if you declined by 1% daily? You'd approach 0. 37 times better. Not 37%. 37 times. The entire difference between the two outcomes is 1% per day. 1%. The margin is invisible on any individual day. You cannot see a 1% improvement when it happens. You cannot feel it. You cannot take a photograph of it. You can only measure it at the end, when the compounding has been running long enough to make the result undeniable. Watch how he opens the basement. There is no hesitation, no searching, no fumbling. Every item is exactly where it is supposed to be. Every action flows from the previous one without a pause for decision. This is not the behavior of a man accessing something after a long absence. This is the behavior of a man whose body has done this so many times that the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for conscious decision-making, has handed the process over to something more efficient, to habit, to the deep groove of a behavior practiced past the point where it requires will. Neuroscientists call this automaticity, the state in which a behavior has been repeated so consistently in response to such a consistent cue that it no longer requires conscious initiation. It simply runs. The brain has built a dedicated neural pathway for the behavior, a shortcut that bypasses the energy-expensive machinery of conscious decision, and the body moves without needing to be told. This is what daily discipline, practiced consistently over time, actually produces. Not willpower, not motivation, not a constant supply of enthusiasm that never runs out. A nervous system that has been trained to run the right behaviors automatically, in the right contexts, without burning the mental fuel that willpower requires. John Wick does not will himself into the suit. He reaches for it. The reaching is automatic. The discipline happened months and years before this night. The night is just the delivery, has handed the process over to something more efficient, to habit, to the deep groove of a behavior practiced past the point where it requires will. In Chapter 2, there is a scene that functions as one of the most quietly important moments in the entire franchise. John Wick sits in a tailor's chair in Rome, being measured and fitted for a suit, and the tailor does not ask him what he wants the suit to look like. He does not ask about preferences or aesthetics. He asks what John will be doing. Because the suit is built for the function. The lining is tactical. The panels are reinforced at the precise points where John's body needs protection based on how John specifically moves in a fight. The suit is built for a person with a completely specific, completely defined identity. A person who already knows exactly what they are. James Clear's deepest argument in Atomic Habits is not about habits at all. It is about identity. He writes that the most effective and durable behavior change does not start with outcomes, the things you want to achieve, and does not even start with process, the habits you want to build. It starts with identity, with the answer to the question, who is the type of person who would naturally do this? He writes, the goal is not to read a book. The goal is to become a reader. The goal is not to run a marathon. The goal is to become a runner. The goal is not to learn an instrument. The goal is to become a musician. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you're becoming. And the most powerful system you can build is one that is attached not to an outcome you want to reach, but to an identity you are choosing to grow into. John Wick does not train because he wants to complete a specific mission. He trains because he is a man who trains. The training is not in service of a goal. The training is an expression of identity. And when the goal disappears, when the wife dies and the house is burned, and the mission changes and the circumstances shift, the training does not stop, because it was never tied to the circumstances. It was tied to who he is automatic. The discipline happened months and years before this night. The night is just the delivery, has handed the process over to something more efficient, to the habit, to the deep groove of a behavior practiced past the point where it requires will. Think about what is happening in that training sequence in Chapter 3's aftermath. John Wick has just been shot off a roof by the man he trusted most. His body is damaged. His alliances are gone. He has nothing, no mission, no contract, no external deadline or accountability structure forcing him to train. And he trains because the discipline is not attached to the motivation. The discipline is attached to the identity. And the identity does not change when the circumstances change. This is the single most important shift you can make in how you think about your own daily discipline. Not, what do I need to do today to reach my goal? But, what would the person I am becoming naturally do today? The first question puts the behavior in service of an outcome that may or may not arrive, and that is completely outside your control. The second question puts the behavior in service of an identity that is available to you right now, today, in every action you choose to take. Research on behavioral reinforcement consistently shows that consistent actions gradually develop internal rewards through competence, satisfaction, and identity reinforcement. The behavior starts generating its own fuel. The discipline starts feeling less like discipline and more like expression. John Wick is not disciplined in the way that requires daily acts of will. He is disciplined in the way that requires identity. He is the type of person who trains, who sharpens, who does the work in private without needing the performance to feel real. And because that identity is deeply held and completely consistent, the behavior is essentially unstoppable. There is no wasted motion in John Wick's preparation, not because he is superhuman, because he has built a system that removes the need for decisions about preparation. The system runs, and the decisions that were once required, what to bring, what to check, what order to do things in, have all been made in advance and embedded in the routine. This is the first pillar of the daily discipline blueprint. Remove decisions from daily execution. James Clear calls this environment design, the deliberate shaping of your physical and contextual environment so that the behaviors you want to perform are easy, obvious, and require minimal decision-making at the moment of execution. The preparation for the practice happens the night before. The layout of the workspace happens before the workday starts. The choices about what you will do, when you will do it, and in what order you will do it, those choices are made when you have mental energy, not at the moment when you are trying to execute. Stanford researcher B.J. Fogg calls this the minimum viable habit. Make it so small, so stupidly easy, that your brain can't say no. Then watch momentum take over, because discipline compounds while motivation evaporates. The second pillar is the practice of process over outcome. And nowhere in the franchise is this more viscerally demonstrated than in the way Keanu Reeves actually trained for these films. For Chapter 4 specifically, Reeves began preparing 4 to 5 months before production started. 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. He trained in judo, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, tactical shooting with former competitive shooter Taron Butler, and close quarters tactics with former Navy SEAL Sean Ryan. The International Judo Federation was so impressed with his execution of technique that they awarded him an honorary black belt. An honorary black belt. Not because he was trying to get a black belt, because he was trying to do the work correctly, consistently, for enough time that the quality of the outcome took care of itself. Watch that sequence and understand what you are actually seeing. You are not watching talent. You are not watching natural ability. You are not watching motivation or inspiration or a moment of peak performance arrived at through some undefined inner fire. You are watching approximately 2,000 hours of accumulated practice, 4 months at 8 hours a day across 4 films, with the compounding effect of each film's training building on the last, delivered at the moment the scene demanded it. Chad Stahelski confirmed this directly. Reeves told Screen Rant, "I had the benefit of the training for John Wick and then training for Chapter 2. And so I got a little bit better, just a little higher hand. Just because you're doing the reps, right? You're doing all the work. A little better. Just because you're doing the reps. Not a breakthrough, not a revelation, not a sudden surge of capability. A little better. Every time. From every film to the next. Small, consistent, incremental improvement accumulated over years until the gap between where he started and where he ended was so large that it no longer looked like improvement. It looked like magic. It was not magic. It was 1%. The third pillar of the daily discipline blueprint is what researchers call implementation intentions, the specific, concrete, advanced decision about when, where, and how a behavior will occur. Psychologist Peter Gollwitzer at New York University found that people who made specific implementation intentions, I will do X at Y time in Z location, followed through on behaviors at rates up to 300% higher than people who simply committed to doing the behavior without specifying the context. Not 30% higher, 300%. The specificity of the commitment is the mechanism. A vague intention, I will train today, leaves the decision open at the moment of execution, which means the decision is made by whoever shows up to make it, and who shows up when you're tired, when you had a bad day, when the couch is right there and the training room requires a drive, is almost never the version of you who made the commitment. It is the version of you that wants comfort, and comfort will win that negotiation almost every time. A specific implementation intention, I will train at 6 a.m. in the garage for 45 minutes, removes the negotiation entirely. The decision was made at a time when you had the mental clarity to make it correctly. The execution simply follows the pre-made decision. No willpower required at the moment of action. The willpower was spent in planning, not in execution. John Wick does not decide to train when he wakes up. He trained yesterday. He will train tomorrow. The decision is made at the identity level, permanently, irrevocably. And the daily execution is simply the expression of that decision. The fourth pillar is the never miss twice rule. Not never miss twice. Every system breaks down sometimes. Every disciplined practice has a day when the alarm is ignored, when the session does not happen, when the decision falls to the wrong version of you. That is not the failure. The failure is when one missed day becomes two, when the break in the chain does not get immediately repaired. Neuroscientist research on habit formation shows that a single break in a habit does not significantly damage the neural pathway that the habit has built. But a second consecutive break begins the process of erosion. The pathway weakens, the automaticity degrades. The cue routine reward loop that makes the behavior self-sustaining begins to dissolve. And a third day without the behavior starts to feel genuinely different, like relief rather than failure, because the brain has begun to update its model of who you are. John Wick between films was never in danger of the never miss twice trap, because the identity was too deeply held. But you can see its flip side in what happens when he is forced to miss entirely, forced off the mats and into recovery after being shot, after being injured, after being beaten. And in every case, the moment the body allows it, he is training again. Not because the external deadline demands it, because the identity won't allow extended absence. 3 men with a pencil. The point of that story, the reason Vigo tells it with that specific mix of awe and terror, is not the kills. It is what the kills represent. A man so thoroughly trained, so deeply practiced, so completely saturated with the physical and mental patterns of his discipline that the absence of a weapon does not change the outcome. The capability is in the system, not the tool. James Clear argues in Atomic Habits that habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. Just as money grows over time through compound interest, the effects of your habits accumulate and lead to significant changes when practiced consistently. The pencil story is compound interest made physical. Every single day that John Wick trained in judo, a throw practiced 10,000 times, a technique executed in the gym at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday with nothing at stake, added one more increment to a skill that was building invisibly, silently, in a direction that could not be seen on any individual day. The 5,000th repetition was not noticeably better than the 4,999, but it was noticeably, dramatically, incomprehensibly better than the first. This is the mechanic that makes daily discipline the most powerful force in human achievement. Not because it feels powerful while you're doing it. It almost never does. The researcher and author Angela Duckworth, who spent years studying the psychology of achievement and documented her findings in her landmark work, Grit, found that the people who performed at the highest levels in their domains were not the most talented at the start. They were the most consistent over time. She found that grit, the combination of passion and perseverance for long-term goals, was a better predictor of success than IQ, natural talent, or social advantage. Not better than some of those things, better than all of them. The horse stable sequence in Chapter 3 is one of the most remarkable demonstrations of what compound discipline produces in conditions of radical novelty. John Wick has never, in the context of the films, used horses as combat instruments. This is not a scenario he has specifically drilled for. The environment is completely improvised, and his performance is completely consistent with his performance in every environment he has ever been in. Because what compound discipline actually builds, what the daily work, repeated across months and years, actually produces, is not a set of specific skills for specific situations. It is a quality of attention, adaptability, and execution that is transferable to novel situations. The foundation is not technique. The foundation is the body's trained capacity to assess, decide, and act with the precision and speed of someone who has done this enough times that the process is automatic, even when the specifics are new. Stephen Pressfield in The War of Art, one of the most honest books ever written about the battle between the disciplined self and the self that prefers comfort, describes what he calls turning pro, the moment when a person stops being an amateur, someone who does the work when they feel like it, when circumstances are favorable, when motivation is high, and becomes a professional. Someone who does the work because the work is what they do, not because it feels good today, because this is who they are. He writes, "The professional has learned that success, like happiness, comes as a byproduct of work. The professional concentrates on the work and allows rewards to come or not come, whatever they will. The work is not in service of the reward. The work is the identity. The reward is the byproduct." John Wick is Pressfield's professional made cinematic. He does not train to win specific fights. He trains because training is what this type of person does. And the wins, the impossible, legendary, outnumbered wins, are the byproduct. Clear's message is simple. Success is the product of daily habits, not one-time transformations. When we start any new project or habit, we expect to see results right away. We imagine progress as a straight line, but that's rarely the case. This gap between expectation and reality, the gap between where you expect to be and where daily discipline has actually brought you, is what Clear calls the valley of disappointment. The early period of any discipline practice where the compound interest is accumulating invisibly underground, when nothing above the surface looks different, when the daily work feels disconnected from the future it is building. Most people quit in the valley of disappointment, not because they are not working, because they cannot see what the work is doing, because the graph of compound improvement does not look like a line pointing upward. It looks like a flat line. And then, past a threshold that cannot be predicted in advance, it turns sharply upward, and the results that were building invisibly for months or years become suddenly dramatically visible. If you are feeling something in this right now, if you are recognizing the compound effect in your own discipline or the lack of it, please like this video right now. One tap. It costs you nothing, and it tells me this is exactly the kind of content to keep building. Thank you. Now let's get into the hardest part, the part where even John Wick almost breaks. No one talks about this scene when they talk about John Wick. They talk about the nightclub, the catacombs, the Sacré-Cœur staircase. They talk about the fights that are beautiful and the kills that are precise, and the moments where the full expression of everything he has built is visible to everyone watching. They do not talk about the desert, but the desert is the most honest scene in the franchise, because the desert is not about skill. It is not about technique or system or compound practice. The desert is about the moment when every external resource has been stripped, and the only thing left is the decision to take the next step. He has no weapon that matters here, no tactical advantage, no trained skill set he can deploy against the obstacle in front of him. The obstacle is heat and sand and distance and a body that has been pushed past where it thought it could go. And the only discipline available, the only practice that applies, is the one that can never be externally observed, that produces no visible result in real time, that offers no feedback and no reward for compliance. The discipline of continuing. David Goggins writes in Can't Hurt Me, a book built on a life that included escaping childhood abuse, overcoming a learning disability, transforming from an overweight pest control worker at 24 into a Navy SEAL, Army Ranger, and Air Force tactical air controller, about what he calls the cookie jar, the mental repository of every hard thing you have already done, every session you completed when you wanted to quit, every morning you showed up when the body said, stay down, every rep past failure, every day in the valley of disappointment when nothing was visible and you did it anyway. He writes, when you've put in the work, when you've accumulated the evidence, you can reach into that cookie jar in any dark moment and pull out proof that you are not done. The cookie jar is the compound interest of discipline applied to psychological resilience. Every day you show up when you do not want to. Every single act of discipline in private, when nothing external is demanding it, is a deposit. And in the desert, when John Wick's body is failing and the distance is still enormous and there's nothing beautiful or cinematic about what is happening, he is drawing on the cookie jar, on the accumulated evidence of every day he trained when he did not have to, on every rep past failure, on the body's deep knowledge that it has been here before and kept going. And then there is a harder test than the desert. He lands. And what makes this scene the definitive test of John Wick's daily discipline blueprint is not the fall itself. It is what the fall represents. Winston was not a random adversary. Winston was the system, the framework, the most reliable structure in the world John operated inside. And the system chose its survival over his. When the structure that supported your discipline is removed, when the gym closes, when the accountability partner disappears, when the team you were building with breaks apart, when the routine is interrupted by something outside your control, what remains? The answer is identity. Only identity. Neuroscience proves discipline is not innate. It's a trainable skill. With repetition and habit design, you literally rewire your brain to become disciplined. The rewiring is the point, not the motivation that started the rewiring, not the structure that supported it. The rewiring itself, the actual physical change in neural architecture that accumulated practice produces, is what remains when everything external is stripped. John Wick survives the fall, not because of luck, because the body that built itself over years of daily practice has a structural integrity that cannot be removed by removing the environment that built it. The training happened. The neural pathways exist. The identity is inscribed. The fall does not erase it. The gap between those two images, between the broken man on the Bowery King's floor and the man who walks into the desert in Chapter 4 with complete, quiet purpose, is nothing but daily discipline, invisible, unremarkable, one session at a time, one day at a time. The compound effect running in the dark, building toward a moment that nobody watching the training could have predicted from any individual day. This is the valley of disappointment made cinematic, and the only way through it is through it. 222 steps. This is the scene that the daily discipline blueprint has been building toward since the first morning in the gym, since the first rep on the mat, since the first day in the valley of disappointment, when nothing was visible and he did it anyway. 222 steps to the Sacré-Cœur, Paris, Chapter 4, the night of the duel that will either free him forever or end everything. He climbs. He is shot. He falls back to the bottom. He gets up. He climbs again. He is shot again. He falls again. He gets up again. Not because he has superhuman pain tolerance, not because the training made him immune to damage, but because the daily discipline that built this man also built something inside the body that is more durable than the body itself. The evidence, the cookie jar, the deep cellular knowledge that this is not the hardest thing this body has ever done, that this body has done harder things in private with no one watching, for no external reward, simply because this is what this type of person does. If you improve by 1% each day for 1 year, you'll end up 37 times better by the time you're done. Every single one of those 1% days is in the staircase, not as memory, as tissue, as neural architecture, as the gap between a body that gives up at the first fall and a body that gets up the third time and keeps climbing. Jocko Willink, the former Navy SEAL commander and author of Discipline Equals Freedom, writes that discipline is not a constraint. It is the source of freedom. That the person who builds the daily practice, who shows up before sunrise, who does the work when no one is watching, who never misses twice, is not the prisoner of their routine. They are the only person who is genuinely free, because freedom, in the only form that actually matters, is the freedom to act with full capability in the moment demands it. The staircase demands it. And John Wick acts. He gets to the top. The duel begins. 3 rounds. The first 2 wound both men. The third shot lands and John falls to his knees on the steps of Sacré-Cœur, bleeding, barely standing. The Marquis steps forward, certain that this is the end, his arrogance telling him that a man on his knees has nothing left. Winston's quiet voice. He hasn't fired his 3rd round. He sits in the light, and this is the moment that the daily discipline blueprint, the 1% improvement, the identity-based habits, the system built in private, the compound effect run across 4 films of accumulated work, delivers its actual product. Not the wins, not the legend, not the 77 kills or the pencil story or the honorary judo black belt or the 222 steps climbed bleeding in the dark. This, a man who can sit in stillness, who has nothing to prove to anyone, including himself, who has done the work for long enough, consistently enough, with enough integrity and daily honesty, that the freedom of this moment is not a gift of fate. It is the compounded return on a discipline practice that started in the dark, before anyone was watching, when nothing was guaranteed. James Clear closes Atomic Habits with the observation that every action you take is a vote for the type of person you are becoming. Not a guarantee, not a contract, a vote. And the election is happening continuously, in every small decision made in private, in every rep completed past comfort, in every morning when the alarm sounds and you make the choice again. John Wick voted every single day for the type of person who shows up, who does the work, who trains before the cameras roll and trains between the films and trains after the betrayal and trains in the recovery and trains in the months before the mission that nobody else can be trusted to complete. He voted for that person 10,000 times before anyone ever saw the result. And the result was inevitable. Not because he was special, because the system was consistent. That system is available to you right now, today, not in the form of 4 months at 8 hours a day. Though if that is what your goal requires, the path is clear. In whatever form your goal requires, in the 1% that is available in the next hour. The single vote for the type of person you are choosing to become. The system is how you get there, not the destination, the system, not tomorrow, not after the motivation returns, not when the circumstances improve, today, in private, when nobody is watching. The compound effect does not wait for the right moment. It starts from the moment you decide to start. Atomic Habits by James Clear. Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. Discipline Equals Freedom by Jocko Willink. 4 books, 1 blueprint, 4 films, 1 man who lived it. 1% better every day, 37 times better by the end of 1 year. The math has been done. The system has been proven. The only variable left is the decision you make tomorrow morning when the alarm goes off and nobody is watching. Subscribe to this channel if you need more of this. Share this with one person who's ready to build the system instead of chasing the motivation. And leave a comment. Tell me what the 1% looks like for you tomorrow. The specific thing, the exact rep. I read every single one. I will see you in the next video.